This is a video focusing on the OCR GCSE History question. What is the message of this cartoon? Of course, it's a 6-point question. We've got the cartoon there itself. As we can see, we've got some sort of two characters there. We have some kind of backdrop. We have what looks like weapons there and other objects there. And if we just have a look at the writing there, this will help us to really begin to narrow down and focus on the key aspects of the cartoon. So it's created by the British cartoonist Sidney Stroob on 3rd of October 1938, and that's really important for understanding the overall message of this. The time frame, it's essential. And here we have, it shows Chamberlain on the right with Mars, the god of war, on the left. So there is Chamberlain, and we'll look into who he is. And here we have the so-called Roman god of war, Mars. So let's have a look at what the message of this cartoon is. And of course, we always need to consider the Marx Game. I will be recommending that you need to directly answer the question within your opening sentences. So of course, you'll need to think about what is, of course, the overall message behind this cartoon. And in order to get 3 or 4 marks out of 6, you need to use the source details contained within the cartoon. And you can see I'm beginning to highlight some of those things that you will need to begin to consider. And then you will need to always consider what was going on at the time. That's our contextual knowledge. So it's this area here that we've got to pay attention to. So let's have a look at what was going on at the time. Now, it was Neville Chamberlain, the person that appears on the right of this cartoon, who was Prime Minister in the mid and late 1930s. And it was his policy of appeasement, this idea of giving in to Hitler in order to give him what he wants, therefore avoiding another massive war like World War I, that was quite controversial to many people. Many people thought that it was a good idea to do whatever we could to make sure that there was not another war. Others, however, particularly cartoonists like David Lowe, criticised Chamberlain because people like Winston Churchill also felt that Hitler was being too aggressive and that he needed to be stopped. And of course, it was the British policy of appeasement that actually allowed the Germans to rearm. Now, this was banned under the Treaty of Versailles. They were only allowed 100,000 soldiers, and they were not allowed to have an air force. But Britain and France ultimately didn't do anything to stop the Germans from rearming. This was all part of appeasement. And when it came to 1935, when Hitler actually marched his troops into the Rhineland, just being like an area of Germany, a little bit similar to how Yorkshire is part of England, this too was against the Treaty of Versailles, yet the British and French didn't do anything. Also, Hitler believed in this idea of Lebensraum, the German word for living space, and again, under the Treaty of Versailles, Germany was allowed to take over Austria. And then further on in 1938, Hitler wanted this area here, an area known as the Sudetenland. It was part of Czechoslovakia. And when he actually stated that he just wanted the German-speaking parts, which were just these areas as shown here on the map, the British and the French persuaded the Czechoslovakian president to actually allow Hitler to do that. But Hitler actually changed his mind. He said he wanted all of this area of the Sudetenland there. And he said, if I don't get this area, I will invade anyway. Now, Britain and France knew that this would cause another war in the future. So Chamberlain actually went over to Munich, and under the Munich conference, meeting with countries like Britain, Russia, Italy, Germany, Chamberlain came back an actual hero. He came back because he waved a piece of paper in the air in which he declared, "This is peace in our time." This was a piece of paper that Hitler had actually signed, stating that Britain and Germany should never go to war again. During this period of when Hitler wanted to take over the Sudetenland and threatened to invade, people in Britain were absolutely terrified that there would be another war. But instead it was Chamberlain that stuck to his policy of appeasement, this idea of giving in to Hitler in order to prevent another war. And consequently, and as a result of this, Chamberlain came back as a hero because he had managed to stop another terrifying war like World War I. In a moment it will be your opportunity to actually press pause, and you will need to consider what is the message of this cartoon. So when you're looking at it, make sure you take everything into consideration. Remember to think about what this background could mean. Why is Chamberlain stood this way? What does his body posture represent? Why is he looking this way? What does his facial expressions actually represent? And who is he actually standing up to? How has he actually defeated this person on the left? And of course, don't forget to take into consideration this idea of October 1938. So actually, you need to press pause now. So let's have a look at the overall message of the cartoon. And when we look at the entirety of it, it's clear that it's actually quite positive about Chamberlain. The time period is really important for understanding the overall message. It's important because it's when Chamberlain had returned from this Munich Agreement in Germany, stating that he had prevented a world war by allowing Hitler to have the Sudetenland, that part of Czechoslovakia. He came back when he stepped off the plane and was greeted by hundreds of people, and people were cheering and whistling and celebrating the fact that he had achieved the so-called peace in our time. The consequence of this cartoon is clearly positive. We can see here that on the right, Chamberlain is actually staring at Mars, being the Roman god of war. This shows that he's actually brave, that he's strong enough to stand up to this god of war. His body posture shows courage and determination, and we can see as well from his actual facial expression there that it shows determination. He is not standing down to the aggression that the god of war actually represents. When we look at the weapons here, it shows that the god of war is aggressive, yet if we look a little bit closer and we look at Chamberlain's weapons, it's just his top hat and his walking stick that he always carried with him when he used to meet Hitler in order to talk about peace. It shows that Chamberlain is a man of peace, and instead of carrying a weapon to prevent war, he's been able to do it with this idea of appeasement and giving in to Hitler. I think this map of Europe here represents the fact that he had stopped war in Europe, and it was thanks to his policy of appeasement. And even the fact itself that Chamberlain stood on the right is a symbol that Chamberlain was always in the right all along. So consequently, the overall message is that Chamberlain was right to stick with his idea of appeasement, as it seemed, in 1938 anyway, that he had saved Europe from another war. So by now you will be familiar with the Marx Game for this type of question, and you'll need to directly answer it within your opening sentences. And of course, for 3 to 4, you need to use source details. So make sure that the things that were just previously shown you, you actually highlight and give a couple of examples of that within the answer itself. Show how he was able to prevent war and how he was celebrated at the time. But for the contextual knowledge, for the full marks, you will need to be highlighting what was going on here in October 1938. This idea how Hitler wanted all of the area of the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia, and he had stated that he would go to war over this if he did not get it. Yet Chamberlain was the person who returned from the Munich Agreement as a hero, as he was able to stop another massive war from happening again. Or so it seemed.